In the animal kingdom, hooves are the universal symbol of the hunted. Whether it is a sheep grazing peacefully in a green pasture, a deer navigating a dense forest, or a gazelle scanning the horizon, humans are biologically conditioned to view these animals as completely docile. They are harmless herbivores sitting comfortably at the very bottom of the food chain, designed by millions of years of evolution to be someone else's dinner. They are the background characters of the natural world, armed with little more than the instinct to run away. But nature has a dark, deeply twisted sense of humor, because 45 million years ago, a genetic cousin of the modern sheep decided it was absolutely tired of being prey. It broke the fundamental rules of biology to become arguably the largest mammalian land predator in Earth's history. Imagine a biological titan the size of a rhinoceros, armed with a 3-foot-long skull, capable of snapping a prehistoric femur like a dry twig. But the scariest part about this apex killer isn't its unholy size, and it isn't its bone-crushing bite. It's the fact that for 80 years, human science got this monster completely wrong. Because it didn't stalk its prey with padded paws and razor-sharp claws. It hunted with heavy, cloven hooves. Welcome to The story of Earth's greatest mammalian killer begins in 1923, deep within the desolate, sun-scorched wastes of the Gobi Desert. Legendary American explorer Roy Chapman Andrews, a man widely considered by historians to be the real-life inspiration for Indiana Jones, was leading a heavily funded, highly ambitious mission known as the Central Asiatic Expeditions. This was an era of true, dangerous frontier science. The team navigated grueling sandstorms, violent political unrest, and unforgiving terrain, relying on a bizarre mix of early motorcars and massive camel caravans. They were searching for the ancient origins of mammals in a remote, fossil-rich region the locals called the Flaming Cliffs. To understand the world they were digging into, you have to look at the prehistoric timeline. Millions of years prior, an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs. Their sudden extinction left a massive global power vacuum. With the giant terrestrial reptiles gone, mammals rapidly mutated and evolved, testing the absolute limits of biology in a race to conquer the planet. On a routine scouting trip through the cracked red sandstone, a junior member of the expedition named Kan Chuen Pao stumbled upon something unnatural protruding from the earth. As the team meticulously brushed away the ancient desert sand, what they uncovered completely defied all biological logic. It was clearly the skull of a hypercarnivorous mammal. That much was obvious from the lethal arrangement of the teeth. But it was so impossibly huge, the expedition team literally could not comprehend the scale of the beast they were looking at. To truly grasp the sheer terror of what they found, you have to establish a visual baseline. The skull of a modern grey wolf, one of the most highly effective apex predators alive today, measures about 11 inches long. What Andrews and his team pulled out of the Mongolian dirt was a skull measuring a staggering 33 inches long. It was nearly 3 feet of solid, heavily scarred bone. It was well over twice the size of a modern Alaskan grizzly bear's head. Its snout was strangely elongated, lined with thick, blunt, heavily enameled teeth perfectly engineered for one specific evolutionary purpose: catastrophic, blunt force trauma. They named the beast Andrewsarchus mongoliensis, honoring the expedition's bold leader. As the scientists celebrated the discovery of the ultimate prehistoric monster, they eagerly kept digging. They frantically searched the surrounding sandstone for the heavy spine, the ribs, and the massive legs that must have supported such a monstrous head. They spent days sifting through the dirt, but they found absolutely nothing. Due to the harsh realities of fossilization, a process known to science as taphonomy, the lighter bones of the skeleton had likely been washed away by prehistoric rivers or completely destroyed by scavengers millions of years ago, leaving only the heaviest, densest piece of bone behind. To this exact day, over a century later, that single upper skull, completely missing its lower jaw, is the only piece of Andrewsarchus ever discovered in human history. It is a true paleontological ghost. And that single missing puzzle piece, the complete and total absence of a body, would accidentally birth an 80-year-long scientific lie. Science absolutely hates a vacuum. If paleontologists only have a severed head, they are naturally compelled to try and reverse engineer the body so they can present it to the world. In the 1920s, scientists looked at those bone-crushing teeth and made a highly educated assumption based on a biological concept called convergent evolution, where completely unrelated animals develop similar traits to survive. They believed Andrewsarchus had to belong to an extinct group of carnivorous mammals called mesonychids. If you aren't familiar with mesonychids, they were essentially a bizarre evolutionary experiment where early hooved mammals evolved to look, walk, and hunt remarkably like prehistoric wolves. Using the biological proportions of these ancient canines, paleontologists took the 33-inch skull and mathematically scaled a wolf's body up to match it. The resulting numbers were apocalyptic. For 80 uninterrupted years, textbooks, natural history museums, and wildlife documentaries depicted Andrewsarchus as a towering, sleek, demonic speed demon. Under this canine model, the beast measured over 12 feet long from snout to tail and stood an imposing 6 feet tall at the shoulder. If you were standing next to it, its shoulder blades would be perfectly level with your chest, and its drooling jaws would be directly at your eye level. Weighing well over 2,000 pounds, it was heavier than a Clydesdale horse, but it was believed to possess the predatory, pack-hunting agility of a giant hyena. It was quickly crowned the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Eocene epoch. Biomechanical estimates of this giant wolf model suggested a bite force of well over 1,000 pounds per square inch. To put that into terrifying perspective, a modern African lion bites down with about 650 pounds of force. Andrewsarchus easily doubled that, rivaling the jaw strength of a modern saltwater crocodile. Unlike a saber-toothed cat that used thin, fragile fangs to carefully slice through flesh and sever vital arteries, Andrewsarchus was a biological hydraulic press. It didn't need to be precise, it just grabbed its prey and pulverized the bones inside their living bodies, crushing the spine or shattering the pelvis in a single, devastating bite. It was the perfect monster, a terrifying amalgamation of speed, size, and absolute predatory dominance. There was just one tiny, embarrassing problem with this legendary creature. As modern technology finally caught up to the paleontology world, we realized we had grafted the head of a monster onto the entirely wrong family tree. Enter the 21st century. Paleontology had evolved far beyond simply eyeballing bones and sketching out bodies based on historical guesswork. We no longer relied on assumptions. Modern scientists use advanced 3D scanning, phylogenetic bracketing, and highly precise molecular biology. When a new generation of scientists finally took a second look at the famous Gobi Desert skull, they weren't looking at the terrifying teeth. They were looking at a highly specific, microscopic piece of anatomy located at the base of the skull called the auditory bulla. The auditory bulla is a hollow, bony structure that encloses the middle and inner ear. This piece of anatomy is incredibly crucial in paleontology because it dictates an animal's sense of balance, hearing, and locomotion. True carnivores, like modern felines, canines, and bears, all share very specific, distinct biological signatures in how this ear bone is structured, allowing for high-speed running and agility. When modern scientists ran the digital scans on Andrewsarchus, Those agile carnivorous signatures were completely missing. Andrewsarchus was not a mesonychid. It wasn't a giant dog, and it wasn't a wolf. Its internal cranial anatomy was an exact, undeniable match for a completely different mammalian group called artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates. Its closest genetic relatives were not wolves or bears. Its closest relatives were sheep, goats, pigs, and hippopotamuses. The sleek, sprinting, paw-footed wolf that museums had displayed proudly for almost a century was a complete fiction. The largest mammalian land predator on Earth was, in reality, a hyper-carnivorous, psychopathic sheep. While it might sound almost comical to be related to a sheep, remember that the modern hippopotamus is currently the deadliest land mammal in Africa, completely capable of biting a full-grown crocodile in half. Andrewsarchus proved that hooved herbivores possess the biological hardware for extreme, uncompromising violence. This forensic revelation radically changed what the monster actually looked like. Because its inner ear lacked the balance required for high-speed sprinting, we knew it wasn't built for chases across the open plains. It was built like a heavily armored bank vault. To support the sheer weight of a 3-foot head, it required an incredibly thick, heavily muscled neck to absorb the shock of shattering bone. Its body was barrel-shaped and bulky, resembling a nightmarish cross between a prehistoric warthog and a grizzly bear. It was likely covered in coarse, bristly hair, and instead of soft paws, its massive, heavy legs ended in cloven hooves. If you have watched our previous episode on the hell pig, you already know that hoofed mammals are more than capable of mutating into absolute killing machines. Well, Andrewsarchus lived millions of years before the hell pigs even existed. It was essentially their bigger, much older, much more dominant prehistoric uncle. It proved that in the ancient world, herbivores could cross the evolutionary line and become the stuff of absolute nightmares. But with this new, incredibly bulky body, a massive scientific question remained. How did a 2,000-pound pig sheep actually hunt? To understand how Andrewsarchus ruled its environment, we have to look closely at the world it lived in. 45 million years ago, the Gobi Desert wasn't a desert at all. It was a lush, vibrant, subtropical coastline bordering a massive ancient ocean known as the Tethys Sea. It was an environment choked with dense jungle canopies, sprawling river systems, and coastal swamps. And in this incredibly dense, humid environment, Andrewsarchus didn't need to be a marathon runner. It was an apex bully. In the cold calculus of biology, sprinting at 2,000 pounds burns a catastrophic amount of energy. To survive, Andrewsarchus utilized a highly effective, albeit completely ruthless survival strategy known to biologists as kleptoparasitism. This means you let someone else do the incredibly hard, exhausting work of hunting, and then you use your sheer, terrifying size to steal their prize. The ancient Asian continent was filled with packs of smaller, highly efficient prehistoric predators. If a pack of these carnivores managed to take down a massive herbivore, Andrewsarchus would simply walk out of the tree line. At over 2,000 pounds, absolutely nothing on the continent was going to argue with it. The smaller predators would abandon their kill immediately, yielding to pure intimidation. And because of those massive sledgehammer jaws, it engaged in a biological behavior known as osteophagy, the consuming of bone. While other predators meticulously picked the meat of the carcass, Andrewsarchus served as the brutal cleanup crew of the Eocene epoch. It would chew straight through the thickest femurs and rib cages to get to the highly nutritious, calorie-dense bone marrow safely hidden inside. Furthermore, paleontologists heavily theorize it spent a significant amount of time patrolling the ancient coastlines. It would walk along the pristine prehistoric beaches, acting like a supersized grizzly bear. It could use its overwhelming bite force to completely shatter the heavy armor of giant prehistoric sea turtles that came ashore to lay their eggs. It would also casually feed on the immense carcasses of primitive whales that occasionally washed up in the surf, gorging on the dense marine fat required to fuel its massive body. Whether in the deep, humid jungle or on the sandy beach, it didn't need to outrun you, it just overpowered you. For millions of years, this hooved nightmare ruled supreme as the undisputed king of the coast. But unfortunately for Andrewsarchus, the very thing that made it king was about to become its ultimate undoing. You can outbully every single animal on the continent, but you cannot outbully the Earth itself. At the end of the Eocene epoch, our planet's climate underwent a violent, unforgiving shift. Global temperatures rapidly plummeted in a sudden extinction event known to paleoclimatologists as the Grand Coupure, or the Great Break. Massive ice sheets began to form over Antarctica, drastically altering global ocean currents. The sea levels abruptly receded. The lush, tropical coastal forests of Asia began to wither and freeze, slowly transforming into the harsh, barren wasteland of the modern Gobi Desert we know today. The very thing that made Andrewsarchus an unstoppable apex predator, its massive 2,000-pound bulk, became its ultimate biological death sentence. An engine of that magnitude requires an astronomical amount of calories every single day just to survive. As the jungles died, the giant sea turtles disappeared, and the massive herds of prey it relied on either went extinct or migrated away. There simply wasn't enough food left on the freezing, dying plains to sustain the giant beast. The undisputed king of the Eocene slowly starved into total extinction, buried beneath the freezing sands, leaving humanity with only a single ghost fossil to remember its reign of terror. Andrewsarchus proves that history's worst monsters rarely look the way we expect them to. But millions of years later, its distant cousins would rise up in North America to become an even worse hoofed nightmare: the hell pig. Click the video on your screen right now to see how the Terminator pig ruled the Badlands, and I'll see you there.